Hello again, my little conscripts, and welcome to another Mordian Glory video. In today's episode, we are going to be asking and answering one simple question. What is the best Leman Russ tank? That's right, we're going to be deep diving every single variant of this venerable war machine, comparing and contrasting them, going over their pros and cons. And so without further ado, let's mount up, roll out, drive right into this thing. The first thing that I want to do is go over the shared stat line and weapons of the Leman Russ. What separates the different variants is the main gun in the turret and the datasheet ability. Each Leman Russ has a movement value of 10 inches. This is a reasonable turn of speed. It's not the fastest vehicle in the game. You're not going to be keeping up with the likes of Eldar, but you will notice that this guy, in a pinch, can go a bit further than a lot of your other units. And don't forget, you can always add move onto this move value here so that you can end up going 13 inches and still shooting. As for its defensive stat line, this is one of the best bits about the Russ. Considering that pretty much every Russ variant is very reasonably costed for a main battle tank, you get a really good defensive stat line. Toughness 11 will protect you against anything but proper dedicated anti-tank. Essentially, if someone is trying to bring you down with even plasma guns and melter guns, they're going to have to roll 5s to wound, and that certainly isn't reliable. But when the las cannon and las cannon equivalents start turning up, they are going to be wounding you on 3s. That's pretty reliable, and so you will find that your Leman Russ tank is durable until suddenly it's not when the big guns come out. That's not to say it's an easy kill. At the end of the day, you do have a 2+ save as well, with the benefit of cover. Even against AP-3 weapons like las cannons, still going to have a 4+ save. And with 30 wounds, it's probably going to take a surprising number of big shots to bring down the battle tank. In summary, the Leman Russ is pretty much immune to small arms, very resistant to lower strength anti-tank weapons, but when the real anti-tank turns up, you can expect these things to start suffering and getting picked up fairly quickly. Rounding out the datasheet, we've got Leadership 7, which is pretty standard issue for the Guard, and Objective Control of 3. It's important to note that whilst Objective Control 3 is pretty standard for vehicles of this size, Leman Russ can always go up to OC4 thanks to the Duty and Honor order. Now, it's a rare occurrence that you'd probably want to put the order on this tank. Most time you're probably going to want to put Take Aim on it. But points mean prizes. And if there's a chance, maybe in the latter stages of a game, for you to rush onto an objective and out-OC someone and get yourself some final points, don't forget that OC3 to OC4 is quite an important break point in the game, especially with vehicle-on-vehicle combat. That covers the shared stat line. Now let's get to the shared weapons. Each Russ comes with a las cannon as standard, which can be swapped out for a heavy bolter or heavy flamer. In addition, you can just take an extra 2 heavy bolters, 2 heavy flamers, 2 mortar melters, or 2 plasma cannons. And you can slap on a heavy stubber or a storm bolter. And you could also just go for a hunter killer missile. I appreciate that if you are a newer player, deciding which one of these weapons to go for in your army list can be a bit confusing, can be a bit overwhelming. Generally speaking, the best option out of these 3 here is to always go for the las cannon, because the las cannon is just a really big, powerful shot. And also, when it comes to these weapons here, some people like to go for multi-melters, some people like to go for plasma cannons. Personally, I am a plasma cannon man. I find that the plasma cannon has enough strength, AP, and damage to often get the job done. And also, it does have a really, really long range. The multi-melter has a higher strength, but not in a meaningful way. Going from strength 8 to strength 9 isn't really a break point. It does potentially do more damage with the D6, but it's got a very, very short range. Basically, you're going to pick between multi-melters and plasma cannons, depending on what you want your Leman Russ to be doing. If you want to be pushing forward and being very aggressive with it, you probably want to go for the multi-melters. The range won't be such a problem. Or do you want it to be hanging back a little bit, not like backlining it, but just not on the front line, maybe in the second line, and you want to be able to take advantage of the long range, you go for the plasma cannons. Personally, I always tend to have my infantry and my Bolgrin and my like armored infantry squads, things like Chimeras and Tauruxes, pushing forward. And I tend to have my Leman Russes in the second line doing lots of firepower. The reason for that is, like I said, Russes are tough, but they're not invincible. I tend to find if they're in the thick of it, they go down pretty quickly. So plasma cannons for me, but a lot of people do like the multi-melters. Out of the heavy stubber and the storm bolter, you should always go for the heavy stubber. If you just compare these two very quickly, you'll notice that the stubber is just a better version of the storm bolter. And also, you get to quote the epic film Black Hawk Down, "Get on that 50." So in essence, no matter what Leman Russ variant you're going for, you probably want to have a las cannon, some plasma cannons, and a heavy stubber. But there are a couple of exceptions to this, and I will go through those exceptions when we get to the relevant Leman Russ. So that covers the shared stats and weapons of the Leman Russes. Now let's get to our first specific variant, and that is the Leman Russ battle tank. The first unique thing about the Leman Russ battle tank is its battle cannon. This is its main turret weapon. It's got blast, a 48-inch range, d6 plus 3 shots, ballistic skill 4 plus, strength 10, AP minus 1, damage 3. Overall, this is a very good take-all-comers weapon. It's not going to be the best at dealing with tanks, especially with that strength 10 limiting it against heavier vehicles like Leman Russ equivalents, which end up being like toughness 11 and stuff. But against a lot of vehicles out there, it'll be able to wound them on 4s. Against lighter vehicles, it'll be wounding on 3s. And against pretty much any infantry outside of the super heavy infantry like custodies, you're going to be wounding on 2s. Combine that with a fairly reliable rate of fire thanks to that d6 plus 3, and it's got damage d3. The Leman Russ is pretty comfortable tearing chunks out of vehicles as well as tearing chunks out of infantry squads. However, it does have one very big problem. The weapon is only AP minus 1. Now, the reason that limits it so much is because, well, like I said earlier, cover is really prevalent in 10th edition. And so by only having AP minus 1, a lot of the time you'll find it's like not having an AP value. If you shoot a unit of Space Marines or Space Marine equivalent with their 3+ save and they're in cover, they're still on a 3-up save. It's a 3-up, minus 1, benefit of cover, 3-up. You shoot a unit of Terminators or Terminator equivalents, they're still on a 2-up. It just really limits it. The way you make the Leman Russ battle cannon sing is by boosting its AP and or removing cover from an enemy unit. So working with Hellhounds to remove cover can be quite good. A natural pair for the Leman Russ battle tank is the Leman Russ Exterminator, which we will see later on in this video. Now let's look at the Leman Russ's unique ability, Armored Spearhead. Each time this model makes an attack that targets an enemy unit, you reroll a hit roll of 1. And if that unit is within range of an objective marker you do not control, you can reroll the hit roll instead. This is one of the strongest abilities out of all of the Leman Russ variants. Firstly, just having inbuilt rerolls of 1 is really nice, and getting full rerolls to hit is just a straight up massive damage boost. But what's also very unique about this ability is it affects all of the Leman Russ's weapons. As you'll see with some of the other Leman Russes that we look at, their abilities only affect the main weapon. They only affect like the battle cannon, as it were. But with the Leman Russ battle tank, whether it's the las cannon or the plasma cannons or even the heavy stubber hunter killer, you're getting at least reroll 1s, and you're probably going to get full rerolls to hit as well, considering the game is basically about standing on objectives. Combine the rerolls with the take aim order, and you have a vehicle that can very reliably stack hits downrange. One last thing I want to look at with these Russes is what detachments do they do best in? The Leman Russ battle tank, being a take-all-comers, being a jack-of-all-trades, being a tank that you can basically throw in any list and it'll do all right, is happy in any of the detachments. But where I think it does the best is in Combined Arms. Because of its full rerolls ability, because of Armored Spearhead, you can generate a lot of lethal hits thanks to the Combined Arms detachment rule. I also want to give an honorable mention to the Siege detachment, because being able to use those incendiary shells to remove cover can help with the battle cannons. AP -1 problem. But remember, those incendiary shells can't be used on enemy units that are within 12 inches of any of your units in your army. And so you might find that Leman Russ Battle Tank can solve its AP problems for turn 1 or turn 2, but after that, you might be struggling with that AP -1. That's why I think it's best in combined arms first, and Siege is like a good second option. Next up, we have the Leman Russ Demolisher. This comes equipped with the Demolisher battle cannon in its turret, also affectionately known as the Chode cannon. The Leman Russ Demolisher battle cannon is a much more powerful weapon than the regular Leman Russ battle cannon. It's strength 14, so it can wound pretty much any vehicle in the game on 3s, and it's going to wound even the toughest of infantry. Even custodians are going to get wounded by this thing on 2s. It's also got AP -3, so it doesn't need any help from anybody else cracking through armor, and it has D6 damage. Now that's kind of swingy, but when it spikes, the Leman Russ Demolisher is one of the few vehicles in the Leman Russ family that can single-handedly one-shot pop enemy units. If you get enough of those D6 damages through and you roll high enough, it can spike and it can really hurt. However, this weapon does have two really big drawbacks. The first one is the range. It's only a 24-inch range. Now, typically that's enough for the Demolisher to shoot what's directly in front of it, but it can't provide long-range fire support in a pinch. I've had plenty of situations where my Leman Russ Demolisher has been on the right flank and I've needed some fire support over on the left urgently, and it just doesn't have the range to do it. It's got the line of sight, it can draw sight to the enemy, but it doesn't have the range. So that is a limiting factor, and I would say at least once every single game, you will find a time when your Demolisher is not in range with its main weapon. The other issue is how swingy the damage of this gun is. It used to be D6 plus 3 shots like the battle cannon. In the 10th edition codex, they reduced it to D6 plus 1. Now that very swingy front end of the gun with the number of attacks, combined with the very swingy back end with the random damage, means that this thing is very unreliable. It's very difficult to judge what it's going to achieve. Sometimes it might absolutely nuke the enemy, and sometimes it might barely tickle him. Now, the ability of the Demolisher is Line Breaker. When making ranged attack with its Demolisher battle cannon, this model can target enemy units within engagement range of it, provided no other friendly units are also within engagement range of that enemy unit. In addition, when making ranged attacks, this model does not suffer the penalty to its hit roll for being within engagement range of one or more enemy units. This is actually a really good ability, and it plays in well with the Demolisher's sort of role as a frontline brawler. Taking this and then combining it with multi-melters, I did say I would cover when I thought, there were some exceptions to plasma cans and stuff like that. Taking this, combine it with multi-melters, or going triple heavy flamer, so like flamer here and flamers here, and then combining that with the fact that Demolisher battle cannon can shoot into the combat that it's in, means that it's actually very difficult for your opponent to just tie up a Leman Russ Demolisher. They can't just send some pissant little 5-man unit to tag it in combat and then reduce its capabilities. No, it can absolutely keep on blasting if someone tags it. The problem with this ability is that Leman Russes aren't that durable. Like, they're durable, but they're not that durable. And what I have found is a Leman Russ Demolisher very well may be able to shoot in combat, but often a unit that's charging a Demolisher is going to kill it. And so it means that because a Rogel, compare this to a Rogel Dawn for a second. Rogel Dawns have got the extra toughness, they've got the 5 extra wounds. Rogel Dawns tend to be able to take a charge and then use all of their guns, apart from the main one, to blast themselves out. I feel like Demolishers want to do that, but they just don't quite have the durability to do it against a lot of assault units. As a result of the unreliability of its gun, plus the unreliability of its ability, I don't particularly rate Leman Russ Demolishers. I feel also they're one of the more expensive Leman Russ variants, so you're paying more points for something that's been nerfed fairly recently and might never get to use its line breaker ability. Overall, I don't think they're absolutely tragically terrible. I think if you run them, there will be a time when it absolutely nukes something. But for me, I'd rather go for something a bit more. And it's because of this unreliability of its datasheet ability and the swingy nature of its gun that myself and many other guard players have gone very cool on the Demolisher. It's a very cool tank, and when it pops off, it'll be very impressive. But I am not really putting them in my list right now, and I don't really recommend them. But on the other hand, I highly recommend our next Leman Russ. This is my favorite tank in all of Warhammer 40k. To be honest, it's been my favorite for a very long time. And now it's actually good on the tabletop as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Ambassador's Choice, the Leman Russ Vanquisher. Armed with its Vanquisher battle cannon, which is strength 18, AP -4, damage D6 +6, with a 72-inch range. If you need anti-tank, look no further. There is no feeling on the tabletop quite like the Vanquisher cannon just one-shot popping an enemy vehicle or an enemy monster in one go. If you roll the D6 +6 and you get the 6, that's 12 damage. Outside of heavy vehicles, Land Raiders, Rogue or Dawns, that is going to one-shot pop stuff. It's so good. It's so good. There is a big downside though. It's only got one shot and it still only has Ballistic Skill 4+. So you do need take aim on this thing. But bear in mind, if you put take aim on it and it stays still, it does hit on a 2 thanks to heavy and take aim stacking. Now, a lot of people, misinformed, foolish people that they are, don't like the Vanquisher because it only fires one shot. And they're like, but if it's got an invulnerable save, what if the opponent just saves it? Here's the thing. You don't tend to run just 1 or 2 Vanquishers. That's something that I think if you're taking it for the main weapon, you run 3 or you run none at all. Because what I have found is your opponent might get lucky and save the first Vanquisher shot, but then the other 2, maybe they'll even save the second Vanquisher shot, but you only need 1 Vanquisher round to really go through a turn for you to just do massive, massive damage. Especially when you take into account that its ability gives you a full reroll to wound against monsters or vehicles. Which means even if it's only 1 shot, you do have a pretty good chance of just getting that hit and then getting that wound. And then really the ball is in your opponent's park. What I love about the Vanquisher though, and what I think is something that a lot of people don't appreciate about this thing, is its potential. It's the dilemma it causes your opponent. I have had a Thousand Suns player with Magnus completely change up their game plan, completely change up their turn at a competitive tournament because of the potential that my triple Vanquishers brought to the table. Because sure, he could blank one of them, and sure, he could, CP one of them, but 4+ invulnerable saves go both ways. Sometimes they stop everything. Sometimes you can't roll a 4+ to save your life. And all I need is one of those Vanquisher cannons to go through. And Magnus could have his health halved, if not more, by 10, on average, 10 damage. And that's the thing with the Vanquisher cannon. You've got to respect it. Because it only needs to succeed once to potentially have a game-changing impact on the battle. And that creates a dilemma for your opponent. Do they play more conservatively? At which point maybe they're ceding the initiative to you. They're now being reactive instead of proactive. Or do they risk it and potentially take a hell of a lot of damage from one gun? Combining all of this fun and excitement and tactical nuance With the fact that the Vanquisher is by far the cheapest Leman Russ variant, at time of recording it's only 145 points. You look at that versus the Demolisher, which is 190. You can see why people have started to take Vanquishers. And for me, it's become my go-to tank. It has become my take all comers go-to tank. I put 3 of these things in any list that I'm taking Leman Russes. Loadouts for it, I recommend Vanquisher Cannon, Las Cannon, and Plasma Cannons, and a Heavy Stubborn Hunter Killer Missile. That is what I call the Ambassador's choice, the Ambassador's loadout. It's very sophisticated load. High technology. But if you want to be a little bit more down and dirty, there is definitely an argument to be made for putting triple heavy flamer on this thing. Some people like to put triple flamer on it in a Hammer of the Emperor detachment because for 145 points you can yeet this thing really, really far forward with the stratagems that let you break through terrain and with the advance and shoot. Some people basically see the Vanquisher Cannon as an afterthought and they see this as a sort of tougher Hellhound kind of thing. And I can see it. I mean, if you were to take a Vanquisher, move it, or to advance it 6 inches because of Hammer, and then pay the stratagem so it can crash the walls, pay the stratagem so it can advance and shoot, you've got something that can go 19 inches and shoot with 3d6 automatic hitting heavy flamer shots. So in summary, the Vanquisher is good in any detachment because it just brings all of its own AP. And in any detachment, I would go for that Ambassador's Choice loadout. But in Hammer, it's definitely worth considering the Flammable. Next into the breach, we have got the Leman Russ Executioner. This is armed with its Executioner Plasma Cannon, which is just a really big Makarov Plasma Cannon. 36-inch range, D6 plus 3 shots, similar to the battle tank, so giving it a fair degree of reliability. It's got 2 profiles. Both profiles have blast, so extra shots versus bigger units. The first profile is strength 7, AP -2, damage 2. That's okay. But the second profile is the one that you really want to be going for. That is strength 8, AP -3, and damage 3. Yes, it is hazardous. So after you fire this thing, you are going to have to roll a dice. If you roll a 1, you will take 3 wounds. But that increase in AP is going to be very important for cutting through the benefit of cover and actually taking some armor off people, or just kicking people straight down to their 4+ invulnerable save, which a lot of units have. Damage 3 is most important against vehicles and super heavy infantry, those infantry that are going to have 3 wounds, like I would say Terminators and Custodes. But you don't need the damage 3 against a lot of infantry. You might find if you're shooting at something that's got a 3-up save and a 4+ invulnerable save, and it's only got 2 wounds a guy, don't just autopilot onto the overcharge, because at that point you'll have enough AP and enough damage. So I would say 9 times out of 10 you go for the supercharge, but don't autopilot it and just make sure that you are using the right profile. Overall, I really like the Executioner Plasma Cannon. It brings all of its own AP to the fight. It's not relying upon anything like an Exterminator or Hellhound or Incendiary Shells to be able to overcome the benefit of cover and stuff like that. It just brings all of its damage. The main weakness of this gun is the fact that it's only strength 8. That means against a lot of vehicles, you will be fishing for 5s to wound. Now, it does have an ability, Gung Ho Executioners. Each size model makes attack with its Executioner Plasma Cannon that tags you that is below half strength, add the 1 to the hit roll. I've never been a big fan of this ability because I tend to find that if a unit's already below half health, it feels like it's already well on the way to dying. You know what I mean? It feels like overkill. It feels like you're already probably going to kill it with this thing. Do you really need +1 to hit? It gives it a little bit of independence from orders, I guess, because you get to hit on 3s. It could get it to hit on 2s with this and take aim. But a bit like with the Demolisher tank, I find that this ability is very, ironically, hit or miss. In terms of which detachment I think the Executioner is best in, I would say Combined Arms. I think it's decent in any detachment, but it really shines in Combined Arms because the lethal hits solve the one problem that the gun has. Now, at the beginning of the edition, I would have put this tank fairly low down. But the meta has shifted. It's a lot less vehicle and monster heavy, although there's still plenty out there. And now I think we're very much in an elite infantry meta backed up by vehicles. And the Leman Russ Executioner is the anti-elite infantry option. Of all the Russes, this is the one that does it best. So I would say this is a go-to Russ. I would put Leman Russ Executioners and Leman Russ Vanquishers as my go-to Russes that going forward for the meta. Vanquishers because they're cheap and they can bring enough firepower through sheer volume of cheap holes, and also there's still big vehicles and monsters you need to be able to deal with. And the Executioner because it brings all of its own AP and it can get lethal hits against those few targets the Vanquishers don't deal with. Next, we have the Leman Russ Punisher. And unfortunately, this is just straight up bad. I'm not going to get too much into the nuance of this thing. It's just bad. It's very cool. And actually, one of my personal favorite variants for Rule of Cool. This thing's got a giant Gatling cannon that fires 20 shots. But sadly, they're only strength 6. There's no AP and the 1 damage. And we're not in a light infantry meta. We're in a elite infantry meta. And what's really sad is I don't really tend to struggle for volume of fire in the guard. I don't need something that specializes in volume of fire. I've got all the las guns in the world if I want to deal with light infantry. And when you start looking at like double plasma cannon for the sponsons on a lot of your other Leman Russes, and the fact that those plasma cannons have got blast, you've just got so much anti-elite infantry, so much anti-infantry in general. Sorry, Leman Russ Punisher, but your gun is just not right for this meta. And what's even more embarrassing about this is that its mow down the enemy ability, which allows it to do dev wounds, is actually inferior. It's actually worse than the Taurox Prime. Because this thing only gets dev wounds against things that aren't monsters and vehicles. So you can't even use this to cover the one thing, to try and cover the gaps. You can't be like, oh, well, at least there's dev wounds. No, it does. It only does dev wounds to things that you don't give a shit about. And so what you find is that the Leman, and then you look at the Taurox Prime, which does dev wounds to everything with its Gatling cannon and has twin linked. The Taurox Prime, and it's very rough math, Hammer, but the Taurox Prime reliably does dev wounds more often than the Punisher. This thing is just bad, bad, bad. Don't put it in your list unless you're just memeing. But good news. The next Russ, the Exterminator, is widely considered, including by yours truly, to be one of the best variants at the moment. It's armed with its incredibly reliable Exterminator autocannon. This thing is rapid fire 4, twin linked, 48-inch range, 4 attacks, BS4 plus, strength 9, AP-1, damage 3. Now those 4 attacks right there might seem a little low, but don't forget, if you get within 24-inch range, which isn't bad for half range. I know some of you might be thinking, Mordian, a bit of a hypocrite, you said the Demolisher had to get within 24-inch range was a bit close, and this thing is going to be out of range of. Yeah, that's because its maximum range was 24. This has 48, so it can still contribute at long range, even though it really wants to be within 24-inch range to maximize its firepower. It can still at least support a bit from long range. It's only strength 9, but with twin linked, that actually makes it super reliable. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was Joshi40k, shout out to his channel, you should definitely check it out if you've not done so already, said that strength 9 with twin linked is basically like having, I think it was like a +1 to wound or a +2 to wound, so it's like wounding on 3s a lot of the time. So it actually does wound very reliably, and I have used this recently, and I was really impressed by just the 5s with full rerolls. It actually, with the 8 shots, it converted very, very nicely. Damage 3 is good. We said that with the Demolisher, with the battle cannon. AP-1 though. That is the pisser. That is the pisser. If that's the same problem as with the battle cannon. You're going to need other things to boost this if you want to do damage. Now, you could take this in combined arms, and then you would have Fields of Fire, which can give you +1 AP on this thing. You could take it in Siege, so it's got remove cover from incendiary shells, or you could take it with in any detachment with the Hellhound, and that would pair very nicely. But AP-1 is definitely a fly in the ointment. The good news is that the Exterminator autocannon doesn't need to do a huge amount of damage to actually be a big help in your army. The main reason you take this thing is not the autocannon. The autocannon is very good, but it's not the main reason you take it. The main reason you take this thing is it's a force multiplier. Withering Hail essentially means that if you shoot the Exterminator at an enemy unit first, as long as you hit with its autocannon at least once, any other units in your army that shoot that same enemy unit get an additional AP. So if you shoot the Exterminator first and then shoot your battle cannon on your Leman Russ battle tank second, your battle tank will go from AP1 to AP-2. All of its guns will get +1 AP. So this is what I was saying before about how Guard does have ways of making the battle tank sing. It just requires you using units in conjunction together. Now, the Leman Russ Exterminator is actually, it's very good with other Leman Russes, but where I think it is exceptionally good, where I think it should be leveraged the most, is alongside Rogal Dawns. The Rogal Dawn with its Oppressor Cannon is a very punchy unit, but AP-2 is only okay. It's not bad like AP-1, it's not good like AP-3, it's only okay. The prevailing wisdom at the moment from some of the best players in the world, not including myself in that, we're talking people like David Gaylard from Fireside Podcast, Vic VJ, shouts out to Joshi again. Some of the best players that I know in the world is you take Exterminators with Rogal Dawns, and that is an absolutely lethal competitive. So this is why this vehicle's so good, because not only is it bringing very reliable firepower itself, albeit with a bit of an Achilles heel, but it also acts as a big force multiplier for some of our best units. In terms of detachment for this thing, I think it is best in Hammer alongside Rogal Dawns, but I think it can do well in any Guard detachment. You can have this thing boosting the AP of any Guard unit in any detachment. Even mad things like Recon don't mind having an Exterminator. Towards the end of our motor pool, we have got the Leman Russ Eradicator. This thing comes with the Eradicator Nova Cannon, which is blast and ignores cover. Nice. It's also got a 36-inch range. It's a good range. D3 plus 6 shots. Ooh, that's flipped it around a little bit. Normally it's D6 plus 3. Now it's D3 plus 6. Very, very reliable number of shots coming for this thing. Strength 7, AP-1, damage 2. I like the Eradicator Nova Cannon. I think that when in combined arms, this thing can get past its inherent weakness of only being strength 7. I also think that AP-1 with ignores cover is okay. It's decent. It's fine. I think that this vehicle is going to become more relevant as we enter our elite infantry meta, because its low strength won't be as important. And if you're in combined arms with this, then it's like, okay, even if I face something that isn't elite infantry, I've still got tools to be able to deal with it. Combine this with its urban warfare ability, which gives it -1 damage as long as it's got the benefit of cover. And you get the benefit of cover from smoke. You get the benefit of cover just to sticking your bum in a bit of cover. And I think, on paper, the Leman Russ Eradicator is a very good unit. However, there are a couple of big issues. Firstly, it recently went up from 150 points to 170 points at the time of recording. I think that was a mistake. As someone who has used an Eradicator, it still feels like an 150 point tank. It feels like it should be in the same kind of vibe, same kind of group as the Leman Russ Vanquisher. Something which is cheap and cheerful and has the potential to pop off. I mean, why would I take a Leman Russ Eradicator when for the same points I can get a Leman Russ Executioner, which has got higher strength, higher AP, higher damage, and is just as good in a combined arms detachment. Some of you might say, but Mordian, the Executioner doesn't get that -1 damage thing, eh? And that's true, and the -1 damage thing is very, very helpful on paper. The issue is that just as the Eradicator got its glow up, I did a video about this saying it glowed up, and I love the look of it. But just as the Eradicator got its glow up, the meta shifted. The timing. We're in a melee meta now. So getting -1 damage with the benefit of cover doesn't help you if someone's chopping you up in melee. A lot of that melee damage is damage 2 and damage 3. Here's the thing. If the Eradicator just got -1 damage, straight up -1 damage, no messing about, then I think it would be good. And I also think it would probably be worth 170 points. So there's only one little thing standing between it. One potential FAQ, one potential adjustment to its ability. And then I think it's worth its 170, and I think it becomes truly a good vehicle because it can fit into the meta that we're in. And it will fit into any meta then, because whether it's a shooting meta or it's a combat meta, just having -1 damage all the time is always good. So right now, I describe the Eradicator as a paper tiger. It's good on paper, but it's slightly overpriced and its ability is just not right for the time. Now, there is one more Leman Russ we need to look at, and that is the Leman Russ Commander. One of the most unique things about the Commander is it can take any of the main weapons that we have looked at today. So you can have the Demolisher, you can have the Eradicator, the Executioner, so on and so forth. This gives it a huge variety of weapon options and loadouts, and whatever weapon you put on it can have a big impact on what this thing is actually good at taking on. Traditionally, the weapon of the Leman Russ Commander was the Demolisher, but with it becoming very swingy, I'm not sure that's the case anymore. Sometimes it'll pop off, like we said. Sometimes it'll do very well, smash. But considering that the Leman Russ Commander is by far the most expensive variant of Russ now, at 235 points at the time of recording, if I thought the Demolisher was too expensive for that level of swinginess, I definitely think the Russ Commander is. Personally, I think the go-to weapon for the Leman Russ Commander is now the Executioner Plasma Cannon. Especially if you're in a combined arms attachment, which I think a lot of people are still going to go in, because you can get past the strength 8. I'm not going to repeat myself here, so what I said with the Executioner, right, when we were looking at that particular Russ. However, I do think there's an honourable mention here for the Vanquisher. Now, I know that I am biased, and I know that I am blinded by my love for the Vanquisher, but hear me out. It doesn't matter what detachment the Vanquisher cannon is in. It's always strength 8. It's always going to be able to reliably wound pretty much anything in the game. Sure, it won't have the reroll to wound. It's got a different ability. But if 3 Vanquishers is a dilemma for your opponent, what about 4 or 5 of them? And you might say, well, what about Death Befitting Officer? Well, look at that ability now. Death Befitting Officer is the unique ability of the Tank Commander. When it dies on a 2+, it can shoot with all of its guns one last time before you move it from the board. It's important to understand you can only do this if you die from shooting. Because of the vagary of out-of-phase rules, you can't do this if you die in melee. Big Guns Never Tire essentially doesn't apply. So, I think having Death Befitting Officer with an Executioner Plasma Cannon is lethal in an elite infantry meta. Oh my god. And if you're in combined arms, it can be lethal figuratively versus infantry, and be lethal literally with lethal hits against vehicles and monsters. But I also like the fact that you might not want to shoot and destroy the Tank Commander if it's got a Vanquisher. If that Vanquisher turns around and one-shot pops one of your big monsters or vehicles, I think it creates a real dilemma. I do. So I think the go-to and the sensible option is the Executioner. But I don't think you should dismiss the Vanquisher Tank Commander. One last thing about the Leman Russ Tank Commander. Because it is an officer, it can order 2 squadron units. This makes it incredibly valuable. In fact, this thing is a bit cheaper than a Rogal Dawn Commander. The Rogal Dawn Commander is about 260 points at the time of recording. This thing is about 230, 235. Now, you might say, you know, we've got the Rogal Dawn Commander over here. You might say, in fact, let's go over to it. You might say for 30, 35 points more, you want the Dawn because of its better durability and it can still do 2 orders. And I get that. But the thing is with the Dawn is that its main gun, the Oppressor Cannon, it's only AP2. And yes, if you're running Exterminators and stuff, then I think the Rogal Dawn Commander is a good choice. Because you can boost up its AP and it is more durable for orders. But if you're someone like me that likes to have tanks that are a little bit further back, like I said, second line tanks that are doing fire support, where you can rely on range to give yourself a bit more durability, I would save the points. I'd bring the vehicle that brings all of its own AP. And personally, I think Death Befitting Officer is a much, much better ability than the extra, like the 1 or 2 rerolls that you get from the Rogal Dawn. So, Russ Commanders, we're doing sort of 2 videos in one here. Russ Commanders versus Rogal Dawns. I think both are equals pequals. You can save a few points for Russ Commander and get a better ability. You can be potentially a lot more durable with a Rogal Dawn Commander. However you slice it, Leman Russ Tank Commanders are good. I really like them. I think they're very viable. I think a lot of people are overlooking them at the moment. I think a lot of people are being blinded by the majesty that is the Rogal Dawn Commander. But I still think that the Russ Commander is a very good unit, and I do recommend it. And so, with all of that said, we have covered all of the different Leman Russ variants. Big question is, how would I rank them? Which one do I think is at the top? Which one do I think is at the bottom? At the very top, I am going to put the Leman Russ Vanquisher. I love it. And ever since I started using them, I've not been able to come away from them. They're so cheap and they bring a lot of firepower. And when you've got 3 of them, those main guns do become reliable. After that, I am going to put it as independently good. I'm going to have the Leman Russ Executioner because it brings all of its own AP. But joint second, I'm going to put the Executioner and the Exterminator. Because I think if you're running Rogal Dawns, you're going to take the Exterminator. I think if you're not running Rogal Dawns and you're going for more of a Russ spam fleet, you should go for the Executioner. After that, I'm going to put Tank Commanders. Because Tank Commanders are good, but you can get orders from Rogal Dawns as well. So they're not a bad choice. So they kind of make it into the top bracket. In the middle of the pack, I'm going to put the Eradicator and I'm going to put the Leman Russ Battle Tank. I'm not saying those tanks are bad. They're not bad. And if you put those tanks, especially the Leman Russ Battle Tank, which I would put above the Eradicator, I think that they're good take-all-comers vehicles. The Leman Russ Battle Tank is the El Clasico. It's never, ever the worst option. It's never the best, but sometimes it is the best option, but often it's just straight in the middle. Eradicator below that. Leman Russ Demolisher, second from bottom. It's just too swingy. It's just too expensive. And then I would put the Leman Russ Punisher at the very, very bottom. So in summary, I only think there are really 2 bad vehicles. I think the Punisher is just bad. I think the Demolisher is just unreliable. Everything else above that, I think, is good or better. Is viable. It's something that you can put in your list and it will do work and you won't be handicapping yourself. So out of 8 different Leman Russ variants, including the Commander, 6 of them are good choices. And a lot of it comes down to which attachment you're taking and what other units are going to be in your army lists. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. What is your favorite Leman Russ variant, and which one do you think is the best and which one do you think is the worst? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go ahead and smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Lord Pryor, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.